After 2 decades of terror and silence, Czechs and Slovaks had found their voice again.
People came in thousands, and if they didn't get in, they listened outside for hours on end. People suddenly realized that they can live more freely, and they came very anxious to learn about the new enlarged boundaries of their lives.
Western styles and visitors poured in. This May Day, there was genuine joy. Trust was growing between the people and their leaders. But could communism be reformed?
On the
one hand, they wanted to preserve communism and socialism, as they called it. But on the other hand, they wanted to give it a human face, which meant that they wanted to lift the lid a little. But they hoped that the lid would not fly off with the pressure inside the cooker, as it were, that they would still be able to contain the situation.
Toho přetlaku, který je v tom kotli, že?
Well, it was funny that, before, in the 50s and like that, people were looking over their shoulders, who could be following you. And if they had some, somebody brought from West some newspaper, it was in the pockets, deep in the pockets. In the 60s, in the euphoria of free press, everybody was talking freely and at the same time looking over their shoulders. Because I think it was a freedom in spasmodic freedom, that people were really, it was like a freedom unleashed by fever, It was not really a comfortable freedom. It was not.
In May, a grim Soviet Prime Minister, Alexei Kosygin, visited the Czechs. Soviet dislike of Dubček's reforms had turned to horror. Moscow feared the Communist Party might lose power. Worse, Dubček might change sides in the Cold War. A few hardline Czechoslovak communists agreed with the Kremlin.
Nežiadali nic zvláštneho. Zastavte.
They didn't ask for anything special, just to halt the disintegration of the party, stop anti-Soviet activity and anti-socialist propaganda. Stop the growing voices saying that Czechoslovakia should leave the Warsaw Pact. They said quite openly, we cannot accept it. We cannot allow the border of the West to come right up to the Soviet border.
In the early summer, Warsaw Pact troops staged very public maneuvers in Czechoslovakia. After the exercise, they left their signals network in place. The warning was not hard to read. Threats from Moscow and the Warsaw Pact failed to make Dubček climb down. In July, Brezhnev, Kosygin and the entire Politburo arrived from Moscow with renewed demands.
The situation was quite tense. We came to an agreement that the Czechoslovaks would themselves carry out a certain number of crucial measures to restore order. This involved some changes of personnel, the introduction of tighter control over the mass media, and stricter work among certain layers of society. And the imposition of censorship, because openly anti-communist, anti-Soviet publications and articles had started to appear.
2 days later, the Czechoslovak leaders made some concessions, but it was too late. The Soviet Politburo had already decided to solve the problem by force. On the night of August 21st, Soviet paratroopers seized Prague airport. Soviet and Warsaw Pact armies burst through the Czechoslovak frontiers. As the invasion began, the Czechoslovak leaders were meeting in Prague.
We listened to the airplanes flying overhead. Dubček was waiting for a telephone message, but instead the door suddenly opened and paratroopers came in, carrying Kalashnikovs. They stood behind us and the commander said they were taking us under protection in the name of the forces of the Warsaw Pact. What will happen later, we will see. We were prisoners.
Before their arrest, the party's leaders managed to condemn the invasion. By morning, Soviet tanks had taken over the center of Prague.
A lot of the population were bewildered. They were surprised. When we'd taken up our positions in front of the target buildings, people started coming up to us, asking, "What's going on? What's happened?"
They came like burglars and pretended they wanted to help us. So we went to speak to them. We climbed on the tanks and we told them to go back home, that they had lost their way or been sent to the wrong place. They were really surprised and didn't understand what we were trying to tell them.
Suddenly we heard a shot. I saw a boy, only 2 meters away from me, fall to the ground. The armored car started to advance. People moved to the side streets. But there were so many of us, we couldn't all fit in those narrow streets. I was at the edge of the crowd. The armored car struck me. There was nothing I could do. It hit my knee with the front wheel.
See, I went through the Hitler invasion in 1939, and I must say that the Soviet invasion, 1968, was even crueler impact than the Hitlerite one, because Hitler was our declared enemy. We didn't expect anything from him but the worst. But here, those who for years and decades preached that they are our best friends, our brothers, the guarantors of our independence, came with an army of 500,000 to suppress our drive for a little bit more freedom. They came to crush it, they came to murder it. to murder that attempt to democratize socialism.
This action was dictated, first of all, by the need to preserve the balance of power in the relations between East and West. And of course, we were interested in preserving the established system.
Czechoslovakia's kidnapped leaders decided resistance was hopeless. In a tragic broadcast, Dubček broke the news.
Prosím vás, nedopusťte provokácie. Nedovolte vniesť paniku do našich hradov. Nezostáva nám v ťažkej situácii nič iné.
The Czechoslovak experiment, the most daring attempt to marry communism with democracy, had failed.